Uh, the medieval era, a time of knights in shining armor, grand castles, and fair maidens locked in towers. Sounds like a dream, right? Wrong. Living in medieval times would be less storybook romance and more please end my suffering. Let's break down why stepping into a time machine and hitting Middle Ages would be the worst mistake of your life. The hygiene? Non-existent. Forget your morning shower and your scented candles. Medieval people bathed once a year, if that. Toothpaste? Never heard of her. Dental care involved yanking teeth out with what looked suspiciously like pliers from your dad's toolbox. And don't even get me started on the smell. Between the chamber pots, the unwashed peasants, and the random livestock wandering through town, medieval cities were basically olfactory war zones. Think you're grabbing a turkey leg like a Game of Thrones character? Think again. Most of your meals would be bread, gruel, and whatever questionable meat they didn't bury in time. Spices were a luxury reserved for royalty, so unless you're cozying up to King Henry, your taste buds are doomed. And let's not forget food safety was a joke. Salmonella was basically a seasoning. Healthcare? More like, how dare you care? Got a headache? Here's a leech. Feeling a little feverish? Better burn some herbs and hope the bad vibes leave your body. Broke your leg? Congratulations, you're now the village guy with a limp. Medieval medicine was essentially a mix of wild guesses and witchcraft. There was no Netflix, no TikTok, and no Wi-Fi. Your best options for fun were bear baiting, listening to some dude play a lute, or watching a public execution. The highlight of your week might be a traveling minstrel singing about how Jerry from the next village over lost a sheep. Social mobility? Ha! Born a peasant? Die a peasant. The feudal system had a strict stay-in-your-lane policy, and that lane was often dirt. The idea of following your dreams didn't exist unless your dream was to die of dysentery in a field. Wars were constant and ridiculous. If you think modern politics are messy, medieval politics were a bloodbath, literally. Kings would declare war over insults, goats, or poorly timed glances. And guess who had to fight? That's right, you. Armed with a stick and some chainmail that doesn't fit. You'd be sent to battle for reasons you didn't understand. Superstitions ran your life. People believed in curses, witches, and the power of the moon to ruin crops. Got caught talking to your cat too much? Witch. Left-handed? Witch. Survived a disease that wiped out half the village? Definitely a witch. The only way to clear your name? Trial by fire. Spoiler, it never ended well. The plague was always around the corner. Let's not forget the Black Death, a delightful little pandemic that wiped out a third of Europe. Hygiene was so bad that rats were basically your roommates, and they brought fleas carrying death. There were no masks, no vaccines, and no Dr. Fauci to save the day. Housing was a nightmare. Think you'd live in a cute little stone cottage? Nope. Try a drafty, leaky shack made of wood and mud. No insulation, no plumbing, and absolutely no privacy. Winter nights would feel like a live audition for Frozen. Let's be honest, everything about the medieval era was designed to remind you how much life could suck. You might think, surely it wasn't all bad. Oh, but it was. Castles weren't as cool as you think. Castles seemed like the ultimate dream home, right? Wrong again. They were cold, damp, and smelled like a mix of mildew and regret. Heating was basically non-existent. So unless you enjoyed huddling around a fire while your toes froze off, castle life was just a glorified camping trip. And let's not forget the rats, bats, and whatever other creatures decided your living quarters were theirs too. The church ran your life. Think your boss is controlling? Try living under the medieval church. Every aspect of your life was dictated by religion, from what you could eat to how many times you had to confess that you swore when you stepped in pig poop. Oh, and tithes, mandatory payments to the church. Man, even if you were starving, God still wanted his cut. Your job was the worst. Occupations back then ranged from grueling to kill me now. You could be a farmer, breaking your back every day just to grow turnips, or a blacksmith, sweating over molten metal while inhaling enough fumes to knock out a horse. Fancy something different? Maybe you'd like to be a gong farmer, a polite term for a person who scoops human poop out of cesspits. And no, there were no weekends off. Justice was just insane. The legal system made absolutely no sense. Accused of stealing a loaf of bread, you could be sentenced to trial by ordeal. Justice in the medieval times was basically the precursor to reality TV, shocking, pointless, and full of unnecessary drama. You'd probably die in a ridiculous way. People in the Middle Ages didn't just die from wars or the plague. Oh no, they found truly creative ways to meet their end. Falling off a castle wall? Sure. Accidentally drinking contaminated beer? Why not? Getting trampled during a drunken festival? Happens more often than you'd think. Life was basically a high-stakes slapstick comedy, except nobody was laughing. Weddings were weird. Love wasn't exactly a factor in medieval marriages. Most unions were business deals, often arranged before you even hit puberty. Your spouse might be a complete stranger, but hey, at least their family owned a cow. Education was for the 1%. If you wanted to learn anything beyond how to not die today, you were out of luck. Education was reserved for the wealthy or clergy, and even then, it mostly consisted of Latin and religious texts. The average person couldn't read, write, or do math, skills that would have come in handy when the baker shorted you on bread. Festivals were just bizarre. You might think medieval festivals were a great time, but they were less fun carnival and more weird fever dream. There were events like throwing animals off church towers, yes, seriously, and people dressing up as literal vegetables. And don't forget the public humiliation games, like pelting your neighbor with rotten fruit because they owed you a chicken. Superstitions made no sense. Forget science. People thought sneezing meant the devil was trying to possess you, and that tying a dead toad around your neck could cure the flu. Black cats were a bad omen, and spilling salt? Oh, prepare for disaster. Superstitions ruled the day, so you'd be living in constant fear of accidentally dooming yourself because you broke a mirror or sneezed at the wrong time. Travel was a death sentence. Thinking about a nice vacation? Forget it. Traveling in the medieval times was dangerous, dirty, and slow. Roads were just muddy trails where you'd likely encounter bandits, wild animals, or both. Living in medieval times sounds romantic until you remember the fleas, famine, and fatal injuries from stepping on a rake. We romanticize the past because we don't have to smell it. So the next time someone says they wish they lived in the Middle Ages, kindly remind them that indoor plumbing is a modern miracle and they wouldn't survive a week.